Earlier in this series we talked about creating the product backlog, and in the previous video we talked about how we use sprints to actually manage the workload. We also mentioned in the previous video that we have daily meetings. These daily meetings are often very simple, often lasting no more than 5 or 10 minutes. But it's here where the actual activities for the day and the following day are talked about. The daily meetings usually involve every single person on the development side of things, as well as the product owner from the business side of things. As the development progresses, it is quite common for the product owner to stop attending these meetings, but it is especially important during the early stages that they do attend, and that they actually contribute to the meetings. This is because, especially during the early stages, the development team are learning about the process that they're working on. It's often the case that a development team will have no involvement in the process before they are actually asked to develop the solution, and so they often have questions about the implementation, which they wouldn't have thought to ask until it actually comes to implementing them. And so having the product owner on hand to answer any questions like these is extremely helpful, and it can save a huge amount of time, which would otherwise have to be spent either emailing back and forth or having individual one-to-one conversations. And if the development team and the product owner are not based in the same location, this can be a huge time sink. So what happens during these daily meetings? Well, simply put, every single member of the team is asked 3 simple questions which they provide answers to. Those questions are: what have you done since the last meeting? What are you going to do before the next meeting? And what's stopping you, if anything? This is where the individual developers talk about what they've done. So for example, if a developer has completed a user story, they would mention that fact here. They would also mention any user stories that they're intending to take before the next daily meeting. And then if any of the other developers were thinking about taking those same stories, they have the opportunity to discuss that fact there and decide who is better suited to do that user story. If there is anything stopping the developers or anyone else involved with the project from actually achieving those results that they set themselves, this is where they would mention them. And this is also where having the product owner on hand is really useful. Some of the questions that will need answering will stop the developers from actually completing their work, and they will likely say so when answering this question. If the product owner is on hand and able to provide the answers to those questions immediately, the entire process to resolve that issue goes away, and the developer is able to get on and do their work. If any of these, what are called blockers, are identified which cannot be resolved during that meeting, it's the responsibility of both the developer and the project manager to go away and resolve it. If the product owner isn't at that meeting, the solution may be a simple telephone call, but depending on the detail of that blocker, it could actually result in something which will delay the implementation for that sprint, or even the entire project. If funding was pulled for a project, that would technically be a blocker, which would obviously have a huge impact on that project's delivery. As I say, during the early stages of the development, it is important that these meetings take place, and that the product owner is part of these meetings. As the developers understand more and more about the product, they may be able to answer some questions that they have themselves, rather than relying on the product owner for every single answer. It's important to understand the fact that during the initial stages, the developers have almost no idea what it is that you want them to develop. It's only over time that they will actually learn and understand. These daily meetings will continue to take place every single day of the project, but as we mentioned, we also have these sprints, and so at the end of each sprint there will also be a review of what's happened during that sprint. This meeting is conveniently known as a sprint review. And in the next video we'll be talking about what actually happens during this meeting. So make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss it.